Everything, no matter what it is rooted in our awareness. And I don't know, you may wonder, you may not, how does this apply to practical life? How does all this apply to practical life? Well, when we take ourselves to be somebody who's based on all the descriptions in the dictionary, then our body, speech, and mind are very limited. They're limited to anything that can be described by all the definitions in the dictionary. That's all that we know about our body, speech, and mind. We think our body, speech, and mind is within the skin line. It's within the framework of the body, and that's our context for body, speech, and mind. It's in here. And that this body, speech, and mind, we have to control it all the time because it's out to get us, whoever that us is. It's out to get us. Our sensations, some of those are a little scary, so we have to keep those under control. Our thoughts, some of those are a little scary. We have to keep those under control. And our emotions, a lot of those are scary too, so we have to keep those under control. So all of what we perceive to be our body, speech, and mind is channeled into that activity. It's all of our awareness is channeled into that activity, the activity of controlling all our perception. And how is that distinct from awakened awareness and the exalted body, speech, and mind of awakened awareness? When we get to know our perceptions as they really are, already accomplished awakened awareness, timelessly free and originally pure. When we get to know each one of our perceptions as that, we relax. We completely relax. We find an ease of being we didn't have when we were all whipped up into controlling all of these things going on here. And as we relax, we find something amazing occurring. Our awareness, rather than being trapped in this prison called a body, we find that we're not trapped within a body after all, that the relaxation of the ease of our being, this awakened awareness that we're discovering in our reinvention of every perception, is also timelessly free. Our body, speech, and mind are timelessly free. We find, much to our amazement, that rather than our body, speech, and mind being trapped and confined into a subjective existence, that it's always been mingled and blended as the vast expanse of infinite space, the vast expanse of awareness. And so, this is amazing. It's truly amazing, yet it's the reality, the ordinary reality of what everyone is. And we can't possibly know anything about it other than as a fluke breakthrough that is momentary, unless we realize this freedom in immediate perception. This freedom in immediate perception automatically leads to just aware basic space, knowing ourselves as aware basic space. And that aware basic space, rather than being an inert void or something, a place we'd never want to hang out, in other words. Well, maybe someone would want to hang out in an inert void, but not this one. Rather than it being an inert void, the more that we realize that each one of our perceptions has always been totally free, the more we just relax all these control dynamics of our own being. And as we do, we find a warmth of compassion that arises, a warmth of compassion, wisdom, and love and bliss. This naturally arises because it's the natural state of our being. We just can't recognize it as long as we're all whipped up into a foment about everything going on, our thoughts, our emotions, and our sensations, and trying to categorize them all. So it's in allowing this relentless compassion for ourselves, in which we just allow every perception to be the timeless freedom it already is. It's in realizing that we also realize its inseparability from compassion, wisdom, love, the benefit for the whole. So you see, these are inherent. Compassion, wisdom, benefit for the whole, love. These are inherent. They're our natural state, inseparable from our already awakened awareness. They do not have to be developed or cultivated. They're already present. And when we realize the essence of our being that is beyond cause and effect, the reality of every perception, then we realize this compassion, it's already here. First, we realize it as immense compassion for ourselves. We've put ourselves through this boot camp, this obstacle course of decades of trying to control everything about ourselves. Oh, it's endless work. Have you noticed that? Wow, and the books you have to buy. Wow, that eats up a lot of the cash. If we put together all the money spent on self-help books and books about awakening, we could feed the people of the world. So the reality of what we are, when we realize this compassion for ourselves that's just based on seeing what we put ourselves through. In other words, we get totally in touch in a very deeply felt personal way with our own suffering, not as some kind of philosophical overlay. And I'll give you the distinction between the two. A philosophical overlay is an antidote or a Band-Aid that says something that applies to all people. We then try to apply it to our intellect and have some kind of salve, balm, or relief from it. So a philosophical overlay is that there is suffering, and the antidote is that there's an end to suffering. So the philosophical overlay of it, there is an end to that there is suffering. Well, we already know that. We know that, but it's a philosophical overlay until we get in touch with our own personal suffering. Unless we know the personal suffering that we've caused ourselves with our own thoughts, emotions, and sensations, and taking them to be something other than awakened awareness. Unless we know that personal suffering that we've caused ourselves, we can't possibly open the floodgates of awakening or compassion. Not either one. Because we'll still be lost within a realm of cause and effect. So we have to come deeply in touch with that. And that's the distinction between a philosophical overlay or Band-Aid and really knowing what this statement, there is suffering, means. To know what there is suffering means, we have to know our own suffering totally and completely. It doesn't matter where we live or what we've done. We could have lived in a monastery all of our lives from the time we're 5 years old. Or we could have been living in Bakersfield, California, eating at McDonald's every day for all of our life and working there too. It doesn't matter where we are. At some point, in order to get in touch with who we really are, we have to come face to face with the nature of our own suffering. It's impossible to wake up without that. So anything that suggests otherwise is only a balm. It's just another antidote. It's only an anomaly of point of view. It may not be the conventional point of view. It may not be what most people are doing, but it's still within the realm of cause and effect, within the realm of time and space. None of these props are needed. So, it's really important for us to get in touch with our own suffering. Most of us have no idea how to do that. There's so much suffering that to confront it just seems overwhelming. It seems totally impossible. How do we possibly even know what our suffering is? How do we know what not only our own personal suffering is, but how much of that is imposed on us by the belief systems of culture? Anything we think is opposed, we willingly adopt. So, imposed. We willingly adopt that. So we've never been a victim of any perception, not even institutions, culture, including the culture of enlightenment. We've never been a victim of any of these things. All of these perceptions, no matter what they are only perceptions. So one of the purposes of the Great Freedom teaching is to allow people to have a context to come totally in touch with their personal suffering, not as a philosophical overlay, but as something so real, so lived, so vivid that it can't be missed. And in coming in touch with that, it opens up a compassion that's never even been imaginable before. never imaginable before. And you see that compassion is inseparable from waking up. So these happen simultaneously. They happen simultaneously. The investigation in a totally loving way of our own suffering and realizing that it's always only been awakened awareness. And the opening up of awakening, the opening up of pure awareness, the opening up of compassion. These two are not separate. These two are not separate. Total liberation, timeless freedom is not separate or apart from suffering. Suffering and awakened awareness are not two. And unless we know the nature of our own personal suffering, not just as some general thing that applies to everybody, it will be very difficult for us to ever be totally free. So, no matter where we're living, we face this suffering. We can only mitigate it to a certain degree through any kind of practice, whether it's eating hamburgers or engaging in austerities. We might be able to neutralize our suffering through either of those. Those are extremes, right? Austerities and, eating hamburgers, that's kind of an extreme too. But I think you understand what I'm saying. So you see, we can only mitigate it to a certain degree. We can't really end it. We can only end it, boom, bring it to a complete stop, when we just allow the pure space of every perception to be the case. We can only do that in coming face to face, the direct encounter with our own suffering. There's no other way. Even though we always hope there's another way. But most of us don't want to face our own suffering because we've never been shown how to do that. We've really never been shown how to do that. We've never been shown A, B, C, D, E. This is how you come face to face with your own suffering. This is what all the points of view are that are part of your own system of pet points of view. And this is how those points of view have caused you suffering and caused suffering in your relationship. And then, what are the belief systems and assumptions that have ruled us and caused us suffering, like ideas of gender, socioeconomic status, caste, any of these things. Our religious and spiritual belief systems, how have those caused us suffering? Unless we look clearly at those things, we can never see our own suffering. And these two are together. They're inseparable. Seeing that suffering and waking up. They're totally inseparable. So, if we're trying to foist suffering out of the picture through a lot of practices, none of them will work unless we're resting naturally while we're doing the practices and we're just allowing the free flow of whatever the perceptions are. Nothing need be done about the perceptions. They're their own undoing. You see, there's nothing separate from awakened awareness. The dynamic energy of awakened awareness is its own undoing. Nothing has to be done about it. We don't need to clobber it over the head or eat a chocolate cake over it or anything else, whatever it is, it's its own undoing. And we can only see that if we rest as the vivid wakefulness that's the reality of every perception. If we don't have that rest, that ease of being, that allowance in every single perception, then we can never possibly realize that. So you see, it's not dependent on circumstance. No matter where we're living or how we've been living our life, we have to come face to face with our own suffering. And here in the Great Freedom Teaching, there's a way that's set out to do that, that's very beautiful, easeful, and gentle, and it's quick. In other words, you don't have to wait for lifetimes to wake up. You see, the moment you start to get in touch with the immensity of your own suffering, immediately awakening becomes more and more obvious. That's just the way it is. So the direct introduction to who we are is what's most obvious right here. That's the beginning point. That's the starting point. When we come face to face with the reality of what we are in such a direct way, and how taking all our perceptions to be something real has affected us, then we feel bittersweetness. bittersweetness. We feel sad, intensely compassionate, maybe some grief for everything we've put ourselves through. And then as we realize that about us, we realize that about everyone. We're not just realizing about us. You see, this compassion, it has no separation. So instantaneously, we're realizing that everyone suffers. Through really coming in touch with the depth of our own suffering, then we realize how much everyone suffers. No longer is it a philosophical overlay, there is suffering or everyone suffers. We deeply know it. We know it so personally, so inseparably, but we know it as aware basic space. You see, we're not knowing it as a personal somebody. We're knowing it as awakened awareness, and this just happens automatically. It happens automatically. It doesn't require some kind of heroic endeavor that is for some kind of system of elect beings. All beings are elect. Everything is awakened awareness. So every perception is elect. Every perception is elect. And this critical juncture, this crucial time in human history, is that we have to realize this now. We have to realize that this that we are is already accomplished. And then each of us must take a stand for ourselves as that, rather than continuing to persist lost in a world of labels. It's like being lost in dictionary.com for your entire life. Just running around from page to page. Countless pages and more coming every day. No one would want to do that. Lost in the space of dictionary.com. So, when we simply allow the ease of our being, this natural rest that is already the case in every perception, we more and more taste this reality of pure space. And rather than tasting it as something other than us, we taste it as us. It is who we are. It's not only who we are as a personal somebody, but it's the totality of what we are, the vastness of what we are. This exalted body, speech, and mind that is entirely compassionate, wise, of benefit to the whole. All learning is already included and contained within it. And then from that vantage, we live our life. We live our life from the vantage of not having to adopt any extremes or frames of reference about anything. And when we live our life without adopting extremes or frames of reference about anything, then we see in a very practical way all kinds of solutions to problems in our own life, to problems in our families, community, and world, because we have no frame of reference. We no longer need to be within the solution-making capacities of cause and effect in time and space. The reality is that we're beyond causality. We include cause and effect in time and space, but cause and effect, time and space is not our true identity. When we rest as the master of awareness, the master of all, then great solutions come into being that couldn't have possibly been seen before. So this is the crucial juncture for humankind at this point. In all fields, no matter what they are. This is equally true in religion, spirituality, philosophy, medicine, teaching, healthcare, whatever we might name. We need solutions in all of these areas that support this global human culture that is now united together. We need things that not only serve specific cultures, but serve global culture altogether, because these specific cultures are becoming more and more diffuse. Many of the cultural boundaries are slipping away, and more we're seeing ourselves as a global human culture. So we see solutions that can serve this global human culture when we allow ourselves to be that which is beyond causality. We can't see those as long as we're still wrapped up in cause and effect. We might have a fluke breakthrough here and there, but that's all it'll be. So, it's really up to us. It's really up to us. For example, when it comes to the culture of enlightenment, until now in human history, the culture of enlightenment has been within the confines of conventional cultural norms. So the entire culture of enlightenment grew up, so to speak, within cultures throughout the world that were severely restricted by the means of communication and by transportation. So all of these teachings that were developed to serve specific cultural contexts that were limited in their forms of communication and transportation. Most people never traveled more than 25 miles from where they lived. So everything about their life occurred there. And many of the great traditions and great teachings, in fact, all of the direct teachings began as oral traditions. So when I talk about direct teachings, I talk about the circumstance that's going on in this room, where everything that's heard is about the truth as immediate and available through direct perception. All of these began as oral traditions that were passed down from generation to generation, where no one knew how to read or write. And so, reading and writing and all of that, that's only been a recent invention. That's only been a recent mode of communication in human history. So, now, and then reading and writing, that just sort of chugged along in a linear way until about 10 years ago, really, when the internet began to become prevalent and electronic documents started to become widely prevalent. And so, anything written down about any of these teachings, first of all, one had to study for a long time before ever writing it down, because you had to be so sure about what you were going to say, because it could never be changed. If you're writing on a palm leaf with mushroom dye, you want to be very clear about what you're going to say when you write it down. And so people would study something like Sanskrit, as an example, for 10 to 18 years before writing a single word of an oral tradition on a palm leaf. And, of all these palm leaves everywhere, only 5% of them have been translated into English. So who knows what's out there? Or take Tibet, for example. A liturgy so rich, so profound, the pinnacle teachings of Tibetan Buddhism, Adi Yoga, Dzogchen, that, there are so many tantras or sutras, there are probably less than 0.1% that have been translated into English. So you see, we have this wealth of information, but none of it's readily available right now, and much of it needs to be translated. But, we do have key things that are available to us, and many of those are available to us as we are. So they're already available within our awakened awareness. The reality of what they are is already available within our awakened awareness. Right now, at this point in human history, because we are so connected all over the globe, the time has come to shatter these confines of enlightenment culture and have an enlightenment culture that applies to everyone. We can then still practice it in our own way, but as a human culture, we'll have a baseline or a definitive practice, the practice of timeless freedom. Because you see, timeless freedom, it's not constrained by anything. It doesn't matter where you live. You can live in a Tibetan monastery or a Hindu ashram, or you can live in a Catholic monastery or a tribal culture, wherever it is. It doesn't matter where you live. You can continue to enjoy the rituals of your own culture and be timelessly free at the same time. But you see, when we share this so directly with each other throughout global human culture, and we create from the grassroots up a global culture for the mutual support of enlightenment or awakening, then we shatter these confines of enlightenment culture that seem to be holed up in all these specific pockets throughout the world. We allow what really, the lineage that all of these teachings really belongs to is humankind. That's the lineage. That's the lineage that the teachings belong to. So as long as we take the teachings to be owned by a certain lineage, then they're not available to everyone. And there are all kinds of rules about getting the teaching. This can't be the case anymore, not at this critical juncture. We have to open our doors, no matter who we are. The Great Freedom Teaching, Hindu ashrams, Tibetan monasteries, throw open our doors with incredible openness and say, welcome everyone. We want to see what applies to all of global human culture. We want everyone to be connected. We don't need to be holed up in our own idea of anything anymore. This is really what timeless freedom is. All ideas about everything go. All conventions, no matter how much we've been wrapped up in a frame of reference or a convention, like a particular monastery, ashram, a teaching, setting, corporation, wherever it is we've been living our life, all conventions go. We no longer live within the 9 dots. We're not living within a box anymore. So even if we're a great lama or a great guru or whatever we are, there are no conventions. There are absolutely no conventions. And at some point, we move beyond all these conventions. This is what timeless freedom is. And when we really move beyond conventions, then we see that it is time. It is time for a teaching that serves global humankind. We really have to come together on this, all of it, all of us, because of all the institutions in the world, the culture of enlightenment, for example, is the most gender biased. It's the most gender biased of all the world institutions. Isn't that amazing? And wherever there is such extreme gender bias, there is a diminishment of both genders. So both genders are incapable of thriving. So, I just say, drop all the conventions right here. Leave them all right here. I'll take them all. You can leave every one of them right here. And never turn back. Just come to a complete stop because, everything you already know. You're already timelessly free, already completely timelessly free. You've never needed any convention to prop you up. And I'm not suggesting, anything like burn all the books or anything else. No extremes. We all can enjoy the circumstances we enjoy, whatever they may be, yet be timelessly free and support everyone everywhere in the direct perception of awakened awareness. Support everyone everywhere in that. The most direct teachings, the teachings that have been reserved only for the elect after many, many years of doing whatever has gone on, practice, rituals, whatever it is. The preliminary practices today are getting in touch with our own suffering in a very direct way, a detailed way to come in touch with our own suffering. Once one does that, no other preliminary practices are needed. No other preliminary practices are needed. Anyone who ever walks through the door of an ashram or monastic life, I love to talk about this because I've always been so drawn to it. It's just so beautiful. It's so totally beautiful. Anyone who walks through the door of any of these settings should at first be totally in touch with their own suffering. No one should go in there with the suffering. So every kind of setting like this everywhere in the beginning should offer this beautiful, beautiful gift, this beautiful bouquet of the direct experience of awareness when someone walks in the door. This direct experience of awareness that can only come about through the inseparability of suffering and total liberation.